As you know, France has been threatening Burkina Faso of cutting aid. But the youngest leader of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, said this to France's threat, quote, "We have been receiving French aid for 63 years, yet our country has not developed. So cutting it off from us now will not kill us. Rather, it will motivate us to work and rely on ourselves." This quote was from Africa Archives, and we could not agree with this more, because at the end of the day, they're creating dependence when they're giving you aid. It's because they're getting more out of your resources and they're not really benefiting you. So if they have been giving them aid for all this time and nothing has changed, then they will learn to survive without that aid.
Burkina Faso is no longer asking politely. It's not curtsying, it's not waiting, and it's not saying sorry. Under Captain Ibrahim Traoré's leadership, a new, bold stance has been adopted, one that's shaken the foundations of foreign forces, led by France, and generated excitement on the African continent and globally. What we're witnessing is not just a political change, it's a declaration, a respite, a moment in time in which Burkina Faso, tiny but relentless, has risen and announced, "We are no longer going to be ruled over." It began the way most revolutions do, with no speeches, but with anger. The kind of seething anger that boils in men's hearts when they have been removed from long enough. When their wealth, including gold, cotton, and manganese, is plundered and schools remain unfunded, hospitals fail. That anger turned into resistance, and that resistance brought Traoré into power. He's young, charismatic, military trained, but most of all, he's bold, and his first strikes in office made it categorically clear. No more business as usual. France was hit first. Decades of cooperation had equated to a partnership where France called the shots and Burkina Faso was at its mercy. French troops had been stationed there, supposedly to help with counterterrorism. But to most Burkinabe, they were doing more watching than protecting. Extremist assaults went on growing, despite all the French presence. So Traoré did what very few African presidents have dared to do. He instructed France to pack up and go. And they did. French troops, bureaucrats, and even some NGOs tossed their suitcases into the mix and departed. But that was only the beginning. The International Monetary Fund, once perceived as a financial lifeline to save ailing economies, came next. For decades, the IMF has lent money to Burkina Faso and other African countries, but always under conditions. Increase taxes here, reduce subsidies there, privatize this, deregulate that. It's a cycle familiar to anyone who's read about post-colonial Africa. The money arrives, conditions strangle home industries, and before long the country is in worse shape than it was. Traoré said no. No further IMF loans. No further structural adjustment programs are marketed as salvation. No further economic fetters disguised as development. And then ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, a front calling itself regional integration and development, but which has itself become a tool of Western intervention. When at the same time Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso all fell victim to anti-French-led coups, ECOWAS was quick to impose sanctions on them, threaten them with war, and diplomatically exclude them. But it failed. Instead of folding, Traoré and his Malian and Nigerian friends created a new coalition, the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a political military pact based not in Paris or Washington, but in the red, dusty soil of the Sahel. It was a bold, uncompromising message. These nations weren't interested in playing by established rules. They weren't looking for ECOWAS to sanction their policies, or for France to sanction their sovereignty. They were creating their own rules. And that's when the world started to take notice. Because what Traoré has done is more than politics. It's psychological. It's cultural. African nations have been trained for so many generations to believe that they are unable to survive without foreigners. They need European military intervention, Western economies, foreign languages, and imported expertise. Traoré is deconstructing all that mental freight, step by step, Not only is he driving out foreign soldiers and institutions, but he's also challenging the very idea that Africa needs to look beyond to correct itself. He's reminding us that the answers are here, in the soil, in the people, in the history of hardship and tenacity that predates colonialism. This movement has sparked something potent. Across Africa, they are emulating Traoré in awe and pride. Senegalese protesters have chanted his name. Youthful groups in the Congo are handing out his speeches. Ghanaian phone callers debate whether or not their politicians should follow in his footsteps. And it's not just Africa. In Latin America, in parts of the Middle East, and even in Europe, there are more and more debates over the Burkina Faso model. All of this, naturally, comes with risk. When you go against mighty institutions like France, the IMF and ECOWAS, you make some powerful enemies, actual enemies. Traoré is likely being watched, targeted by sabotage plots, and even possible assassination attempts. We have seen it happen before. Executives such as Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, and Muammar Gaddafi were all assassinated after speaking out against the world order. So yes, the threat is real, but so is the support. Traoré is not alone. At home in Burkina Faso, he has a sky-high approval rating. The people have poured into the streets to support him, sometimes spontaneously. Farmers, students, and even street vendors are volunteering for the country's defense force. And it's not out of loyalty, it's out of belief. The belief that for the first time in their history, their country is represented by someone who represents them first. Internally, the change is beginning to show. Traoré's government has started to invest in agriculture, encouraging food sovereignty instead of dependence on imported foods. He's made efforts to increase access to education, particularly in the rural areas where French curriculums never improved the lives of the people. He's aiming for industrialization, nationalization of mines, and energy independence. Even if the pace is slow, the movement is clear. And most striking is the way Traoré speaks. Not with political doublespeak or diplomatic jargon, but with honesty, with passion, with the fire of a man who knows he's not just leading a country, he's igniting a revolution. He talks a lot about African unity, not as a dream, but as a goal. He says that Africans need to have their own story, their economies, and their military groups. He talks of justice, not the Western one that is imposed by foreign courts, but real justice founded on dignity and sovereignty. And it scares people, not ordinary people, not Africans, but it scares the institutions that have enriched themselves from African chaos for decades. It scares foreign firms that have grown rich in African minerals. It scares banks that depend on African debt to survive. It scares foreign governments that see Africa as not a partner, but a playground. But it inspires. It wakes up a new generation of African leaders who are realizing that they do not have to inherit the broken systems left behind by the colonizers, that they can build others, better, more equitable, rooted in African conditions, not in European templates. This is the essence of what is happening in Burkina Faso. A realignment, a reset, a rupture. It won't be good. There will be errors, inconsistencies, and disputes. But it is real. It is African. And that makes it revolutionary in itself. By rejecting France, Traoré is not rejecting a people. He's rejecting a legacy of domination. By rejecting the IMF, he's rejecting the idea that Africa must always be in debt. By rejecting ECOWAS as it is currently functioning, he's rejecting foreign manipulation in the guise of regional cooperation. What he's holding on to is responsibility to his people, solidarity with African countries that desire true freedom, and above all, an Africa that's strong, unified, and independent. It's no longer a question of seeking a seat at the table. It's about creating a new table altogether. It's happening, and that vision is being sharpened every day in the Sahel, where soldiers, students, farmers, and gerontocrats are uniting behind a vision that a few short years ago was deemed impossible. authentic African independence. Not the cosmetic sort, with flags waving but policies not. But the real thing is that the power does not lie in boardrooms or embassies in Paris, but with the people themselves. That dream never died. It lived on in the speeches of Nkrumah, Sankara, Lumumba, and Cabral. It was assassinated by coups, killings, debt, and agreements made in the dark. Traoré isn't only restoring that dream, he's demanding its restoration. And with him, Burkina Faso has emerged as the face of a broader African rebirth. Consider what this is: a landlocked country with a relatively small GDP and decades of uncertainty, now leading to one of the boldest rejections of neo-colonial power in recent African history. This cannot be possible. On the old script, Burkina Faso should be pleading for help, not declining it. It should be holding summits to beg for forgiveness, not telling Western diplomats to pack their bags and leave. But that's the thing. Burkina Faso is no longer reading from their book anymore. It's writing its own. And that playbook starts with the people. Traoré's vision, as provocative as it seems to the external observer, makes sense. A country blessed with gold can't be poor. A country with fertile soil can't starve. A country with proud and capable people can't rely on foreigners to make its policies or patrol its borders. He's placed security from within, not as a limitless war against terror, but as a war of dignity. He is educating volunteers, mobilizing communities, and using local knowledge. It's not perfect. There are real challenges, from the constraints of resources to the pressure from outside. But it's the beginning of something real, something indigenous. And on the economic front, Traoré is calling for a system where Burkinabe funds are employed to benefit Burkinabe citizens. That means renegotiating mining deals, rejecting exploitative agreements, and finding alternatives to the CFA franc, a currency that many see as a new colonial tool. That means investing in infrastructure that serves the populace, not foreign investors. Roads that connect villages, not just gold mines. Electricity grids that light up rural homes, not just foreign-owned factories. Even education is being reinvented. The cookie-cut colonial curriculums that subject kids to more Versailles than to Ouagadougou are a thing of the past. There is increasingly a feeling of vocation to awaken traditional knowledge systems, native languages, and curricula that prepare young people to address African challenges with African solutions. Traoré has encouraged teachers, scholars, and societies to imagine beyond the Western paradigm and to think about what an authentically African education system might look like. And in doing so, he speaks directly to the people. No slogans, no rhetoric, just plain, forceful messages that resonate with them, that make individuals feel heard, visible, valued. He doesn't speak to them, he converses with them. This is leadership which does not command, but bond. And while foreign media portrays him as a strongman or junta leader, reality on the ground is different. Yes, he came to power by overthrowing his predecessor. But unlike most of his antecedents, his popularity is not based on fear or intimidation. It is based on hope, on results, on a shared belief that this time it can perhaps finally be different. And people feel it. You can hear it in the bazaars, where there is talk of Traoré's Burkina. You see it in the peripheral villages where citizens are mobilizing neighborhood militia units. You see it in the diaspora, where Burkinabe abroad are returning home, some for good, to be part of this new page. Of course, the response is brutal. International non-governmental organizations have pulled funding. Sanctions have been threatened. Western media vilifies him as a menace. But with every attack, only seems to be gaining popularity at home. Because the people know what's on the line. And Traoré's not alone. The Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger alliance is not just a security pact. It's a spiritual bond, a Sahelian resistance that proclaims, if we fall together. But if we rise as one. The alliance has disrupted the region's entrenched power dynamics. It's disturbed ECOWAS, because this alliance isn't asking to be invited in, it's offering a different option. A different option from tenured puppet governments. A different option from rigged elections managed by foreigners. A substitute for economies meant to draw down, not build up. And as it grows, the new system is more and more impossible to suppress, because it says something that all Africans know, even when it's not been said. We are not weak. We are not poor. We are not dependent. We've been taught to think we are by design, but the design is starting to break. Burkina Faso isn't just liberating itself, it's breaking the magic spell. The magic spell that African nations are always supposed to wait for. Wait for assistance, wait for approval. Traoré dispelled that myth, and in doing so, he's become a light of what can be accomplished. Today, the question of what Traoré will do next isn't even on the table. The question is, who will join him? Will other nations dare to speak the truth about the CFA franc? Will they reject exploitative trade deals? Will they build regional alliances based on trust, not external interference? Because if they do, if they follow Burkina Faso's lead, then we're looking at the beginning of something far bigger than one nation's revolution. We're looking at a continental shift, not fantasy, not a dream, but a hard-headed, down-to-earth strategic shift in the way that Africa thinks of itself and the world. A shift in which power does not flow from Western capitals, but arises from African communities. A shift in which aid is replaced by trade, dependency by dignity, and silence by sovereignty. A revolution where young men and women no longer leave their nations in search of hope, but remain because they see hope emerging at home. A revolution where leaders are elected not based on how well they curry favor with foreign donors, but based on how fiercely they fight for their people. That is the Burkina Faso narrative, and it's only beginning. And so while the world looks on, and critics grumble, and enemies scheme, Traoré keeps walking, not brashly, not apprehensively, but at a steady pace, because he knows that the road to liberty is not paved with asphalt in an instant. It's walked step by step, with human beings at your back. And these steps now are shaking the foundations of every empire built on African weakness. Burkina Faso is liberating, and freedom once tasted is hard to forget. And make no mistake, this revolution is spreading. Across the continent, eyes are opening. In Guinea, citizens are raising their voices against the French and CFA franc. In Senegal, youth movements are pushing against their country's unabashed servitude to Western nations. In the Central African Republic, politicians are looking east instead of west, seeking new partners who respect sovereignty instead of taking advantage of it. In Chad, in Togo, in Cameroon, even where silence still prevails, whispers of change are on the rise. For something in the African spirit has changed. Burkina Faso just so happened to lead the way. But the dam broke. What once was taboo is now said on the national airwaves. What was treasonous is now taught in school. What was impossible, like pushing out the French army or denying IMF loans, is now a fact. And that scares those in charge, because the neo-colonial machinery that has ruled Africa for over 60 years does not survive on guns and gold. It survives on lies. Lies are spoken so frequently that they begin to sound like truth. Lies like, Africans can't govern themselves. If you don't take aid, you'll starve. Only Western experts know how to operate your economy. If you expel France, you'll collapse. But those lies are perishing, and the truth is emerging. The truth is that Africa doesn't require foreign saviors. It requires honest leadership. It requires institutions for the people. It requires a generation of thinkers, farmers, engineers, and warriors who will be made to believe that the earth beneath their feet is not cursed, but blessed, not weak, but waiting. And in Ibrahim Traoré, Africans see a man who believes exactly that. A man so young and with so great a burden of expectation upon him, who does not stoop, who does not sell out, who does not pretend that crusts from the master's table are enough for so rich, so mighty, and so promising a continent? Yes, it's early. Yes, there will be setbacks to come. The road will not be smooth. There will be sabotage. There will be threats. There will be disagreements from within, mistakes, and failures. But this moment, this spark, cannot be extinguished, because it no longer lives in one man. It lives in the hearts of millions. And what makes this movement so much more potent is its anchor in Pan-Africanism. Traoré is not only fighting for Burkina Faso's independence, he's fighting for African unity. He has echoed Sankara in his language, not only language but spirit, a spirit that proclaims, our liberation is bound together, that any country can never be free while the others of its neighborhood are bound. And so, while Western powers are trying to ostracize Burkina Faso, Traoré is courting Mali and Niger. They've jointly offered a federal future, a shared destiny of respect and shared progress. They've expelled French troops. They've rejected ECOWAS duplicity. They've opened the door to a new model of regional cooperation, one in which Africans lead and foreigners follow. Even outside West Africa, this vision smolders. Young Africans in Kenya, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Congo are listening. They're asking, they're organizing, they're dreaming. And in their dreams, France is not the solution. The IMF is not the answer. The West is not the liberator. They are. Africa is. And what endangers the most the old regimes is not the speeches, the policies, or the alliances. It is the spirit of defiance, the spirit of dignity, the spirit of a people who no longer ask permission to be free. Because once that spirit takes root, it's over. No propaganda can wake up the mind. No troops can master the will of a people who know who they are. No sanctions can stop a country that has chosen dignity over comfort. And that is what Burkina Faso did. It chose hard truth over soft lies. It chose self-determination over dependency. It chose to stand tall, even if it meant standing alone. But it's not singular, because this story, this revolution, is bigger than borders, bigger than one person or one country. It's a reckoning with the past, a reckoning with centuries of taking, of betraying, of silencing. And in that reckoning, a new Africa is emerging, not flawless, not whole, but awake, alive, aware. So when the world asks to know, what is Traoré trying to do? The answer is simple. He's trying to bring Burkina Faso back to the people. He's trying to bring Africans back to Africa. He's trying to finish what Sankara started. And regardless of what happens next, whether he lives for 1 year or 10, his legacy will echo far beyond his time in office. Because he has been brave enough to say the unsayable. He has been brave enough to act. And in doing so, he has lit a fire that's growing. To each village where citizens gather to talk of change, to each classroom where children are taught the real names of their heroes, to each market where women sing songs of resistance, to each soldier who begins questioning what he's fighting for, to each leader who stands in front of the mirror and asks himself, am I fighting for my people or for my masters? This flame cannot be bought, and it cannot be bombed. It can only be fed by truth, by courage, by unity, by sacrifice. And it is being fed daily in the heart of West Africa. What Traoré has initiated won't be completed in Burkina Faso. The ripple effects are already being felt across the continent. The world needs to prepare for an Africa that's no longer apologizing, no longer begging, no longer silent. An Africa that knows its worth and is finally ready to fight for it. If this word has touched you, if you feel that this truth must spread further, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these conversations alive, and the fire of African sovereignty ablaze brighter than ever.